Thank you so much for tuning in to CMajor Before the Show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. It's great to be back with you on this Saturday. It's February 1st, and you're listening to CMajor Before the Show. So how have you been? It's been a while. We took a little bit of a break, it seems, or at least we paused, hit the snooze button for a minute, but we're coming back strong. Today's episode is talking about running music and run. So I'm going to be playing a little bit for you at the start of today's show, and then we'll talk about some other things as well, but it's nice to be back with you. This is our 200th episode. Give yourselves an applause. And that was an applause for our CMajor radio team, our CMajor radio show online team, CMajor Before the Show. And the whole team is just really, really great for making this show happen, this podcast happen. CMajor Before the Show is what comes on before the CMajor radio show. So be sure to join us a little bit later, because over there we get a little bit more intense, a little bit more analytical about the things that are going on over here. And we are basically trying to merge the two shows, but still keep them separate, if that makes sense, and just have some fun with it. So if you're into music making and you want just some lighthearted fun, then join us over here. But if you want to get a little bit more intense, then join us a little bit later on over at the CMajor radio show online. So shout out again to the team. Shout out to all of the people that make this podcast possible. And shout out to you, the listeners, for keeping us on. And who knows, 2020 may be the year that we really decide to grow and expand and give you more time and more things to think about when it comes to your music making. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn the music back up just a little bit, because we're going to leave this area. We're going to go to our other location where you can hear me play on the piano just for a little bit. But what I'm going to demonstrate is something that I learned from a friend from Chicago, believe it or not. Many years ago, this person was the first person to really sit down with me and show me how to play running music, something that I call running music, on the Hammond B3. Now, I don't have a Hammond B3 in this location, but who knows? In the future, we may sit down to a Hammond and we'll broadcast from a Hammond. But right now, I'm just going to show you on piano what it sounds like to play running music. And some people may call it something else. I'm calling it running music. It's fun to play. That's our theme for 2020, is to have fun. If it's not fun, why do it? Have fun at the piano. Find something funny about what you're doing, your music making. Enjoy it. Music making should not be stressful. It should not cause any stress at all. Although it might. There's sometimes good stress, if that makes sense, especially when you're preparing to do something that other people will listen to, and then you might get a little bit stressed in the preparation of it all. But the best way to play the piano is to be calm, to be relaxed, and to be at your best. So let's go to the other location. I'm going to let the music stay playing, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about today's topic. I'll talk to you about what we're going to say over at the CMajor radio show about the running music and the run music that you're about to hear. And then after that, I'll post something over on CMajor's Classroom. So just a reminder, going forward for this year, we are aiming to step away from the concept of homework and calling it, or renaming it rather, a fun music exercise. So, I'm even doing that in the studio with my students. I'm getting them to really think about what they're doing on the piano and to really think about the sound that they're making. And then asking them simple questions. Was it fun? Did you have fun while you were doing it? So here I am on the piano. By the way, I'm not sure if my piano is differently tuned than yours. It may be off by a half step. I don't know. I don't have perfect pitch. I have relative pitch. But if you have perfect pitch, you may hear some difference in the tuning of this, and it can be fixed. There's a tuning mechanism on this keyboard. I think when I first started doing the podcast, somebody wanted to know, are you at a real grand piano? Well, technically, yes. That's the sound of a $30,000 grand piano that's programmed into this piano, the one that you plug into a wall. So I have some friends that are doing some serious piano shopping, so I'm going to be sharing some information about that. So now I'm going to put my microphone at a little bit of a distance away from where I am. Okay, so the first time that I learned to play running music, the person that was teaching me was showing me how to play basically the bass line. Okay, and then you have a choice to take this bass line and go faster. Okay, so that's basically the foundation of the running music. If you're not doing that, then you probably don't have running music. You have something else. But it can be called something else, okay? So, and then you can change that bass line. Now, the other important thing to the running music was to play chords above that. So you know how much I love chords and how I feel about chords. Okay, so to me, it sounds like I'm borrowing chords from a blues scale. So basically, it's a blues sound that can be played in other settings that may work. So you may be familiar with that sound, you may not be familiar with that sound. But what I really wanted to demonstrate today was just the difference between the sounds of playing something that I call running music, and there's something called run. Now let me pull my microphone a little bit closer. There are some background things going on today that I did not plan for. So if you hear any type of interference from outside sounds, just know that there's some work being done around this particular property. And so that's what you're hearing in the background. But anyway, the running music is probably going to take over the microphone anyway. So here I go. Let's see if we can put the left hand and the right hand together. Let me turn my sound up a little bit. So that's one part of playing running music. And then you can also go in to the running music a little bit further and then change the key. So it sounds like you're modulating or transposing, but then you go back to it. So, like this. And then you play other running music in the bass line. Things you can do, to make it a little bit more exciting. And then at the end, you just give it. Okay. So, If you heard that before, again, it's something that I call running music. Now, here's something else that I find fun. Running music to me is fun to play, but Run Run was a song that I learned where you play basically triads against other triads. Let's see if I can find my key. There we go. So, if I did this, basically playing a C triad along with an A minor triad, and then stepping down and back up. Skipping up. Okay, so now I'm going to speed this up a little bit. And the whole purpose of the run way of playing or music making was, the composer's idea was to create music that sounded like young people were running around. Okay, so let me see if I can play this for you. Something like that. Okay, so you get the idea. So what did I just do? So what I've done is play a combination of chords, and I'll probably come back to the piano so I can look down and tell you what I've done and then explain it further over at the CMajor radio show. But feel free to join me a little bit later. I hope you enjoyed that demonstration, and then we're going to go back to our other location right now. So if you hear some movement, that's what I'm doing. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a while. I had to take a break because I had some things I had going on in terms of academics. And then last weekend, I believe, was Martin Luther King weekend. So I don't know if you did anything for MLK weekend, but I was able to go to New York and had a really, really great time at the service that I attended. So I'll say a little bit about that in a moment. But let's go to my notes here. And if you're just tuning in, you're here on CMajor Before The Show. I'm your host, CMajor Porter. And we've just been talking about running music and the difference between running music and playing something called Run Run. So the thing that I love about running music is that you can play it on either piano or organ. And I like to think of it as playing organ chords and music on piano. So if it sounds like something that's fun, I invite you to try it and just see what happens. Playing Run Run was something that was actually from a particular composition written by a particular composer, and I don't mind sharing that information with you. So if you'd like to know, contact me on social media. I'll be happy to share with you that music as well. So we're staying focused this year in 2020. We're talking about different things that are fun to us. Do you find transposition fun, for instance? I have some students that really get into transposition. They look forward to transposing, whereas other students may hesitate a little bit. Here's something you can do for fun. Now, I recently discovered this. There is a bookstore in New York, a music bookstore. Well, a bookstore dedicated to music making, serious music making. And there was a composer that wrote this piece called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. I believe that's what it's called. And so it was fun to see that music, I'll call it music, sheet music, is actually published. It costs around $12. But if you have a chance, take a look at it. I think you're going to be surprised. Here in the 21st century, it's still very popular, and I'm wondering if that 4 minutes and 33 seconds could be changed to 4 minutes and 23 seconds, for instance. Playing 20th century harmony music is fun for me. I love it. And I'm asking the question this year, if it's not fun, why play it? Just going to pause here for a second. You're here on CMajor Before The Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. You're here on CMajor Before The Show. I am your host, CMajor Porter. We're talking about running music today and what it means to have fun at the piano, playing music that sounds like running or reminds you of running. So I'm very excited about that because I think that you can write your own running music if you really try. So that's going to be a challenge. It won't be an assignment, but there'll be a challenge. Think about how you would do that. I want to mention that I met 2 siblings while we were away. And so these particular siblings were having fun at the piano, playing the music of Mozart and Bach and Clementi. And just the look on their faces really told you that they were really, really having fun. The New Year theme for CMajor Before the Show and the CMajor Radio Show is to find the fun and the funny in music making. And we're asking a different question today. If it's not fun, why do it? But not making fun of what's happening with the music making. That's different. When you start giggling and snickering about what you hear, that's a different experience altogether. So we're not trying to be comedians here. I wouldn't even know how to do that. I mentioned that I went to church over the MLK weekend, and I got to hear a lot of really great music making. You guys just won't believe some of the music making that was going on at this particular service. I mean, we were hearing gospel hymns. I was hearing all type of familiar things that I had grown up hearing, and it really brought me back. I mean, there's this song called Peace Be Still. Now, you all know I wrote a song called Weathering the Storm, but Peace Be Still is, wow, it's an amazing song. And the fact that they're still singing it today is even more amazing. And so there's a scriptural reference in this particular copy of the song. And then you see the song. It's about 3 pages. The text was written by Mary A. Baker. The tune, H.R. Palmer. And it was arranged by Nolan Williams Jr. And it was from a version by Reverend James Cleveland. So if you look at this, you'll see that the way it was presented in the service and the way that it's written here, two different versions, but they made it work. And in some regard, it looked to me like they were having fun doing it, but just listen to some of the music that went on at that service. So you had 3 hymn preludes, or preludes if you prefer that pronunciation. Precious Lord, there is a balm in Gilead, Were You There? And I think you pronounce this Carillionur. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Or Carillionur. Anyway, I'll spell it. Carillonneur. It's so interesting to see this person performing, and I'd never seen that before, to actually see how this instrument was played. And then you had Blessed Assurance played on the organ, and then you had this processional hymn, How Firm a Foundation. And then, of course, there were some other things that were said. And then you had an anthem. And I think the anthem was called Call to Justice, Justice and Mercy. I don't think I'd heard that before, but the way it was sung was really, really powerful. And then you had the selection that had everybody really just spellbound almost, if I could say that for a service. But prior to that, you had Lift Every Voice. And I wanted to say something about the history of Lift Every Voice. which I will read something to you in a moment. But the selection right before the preacher was speaking, he was talking about there was power in the problem. So the sermonic selection really spoke to that. And it was called Master, the Tempest is Raging. But the title that I grew up with was called Peace Be Still. If you have a moment, listen to that. There are not that many versions that I found on YouTube. And again, the version that they offered at the service was different than the one that I had grown up listening to. But so interesting, all of this music. And there was some other music that took place in the service too. I really enjoyed singing this recessional hymn called Guide My Feet. It was just a really, really good service, like musically, just thematically. Really, really great MLK service. So that's where I was last weekend. And then prior to that, like I said, I had some academic things that I had to do with some other teaching artists. And so I was not able to be present here on the podcast. But thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm glad that you're here. I wanted to share with you some other fun findings in piano and violin music. I've been invited to play with another teacher, and the music is really, really great. I think I'm going to say more about that in the future, not today, but I will share with you some of the music because I don't have all of the copies of the music yet. I'm still waiting on one more piece to come that I had to special order. That may be the way that you say that. But it seems to be something that's not often played. I'll say it like that. But I'm really looking forward to playing this music. And shout out to my students that are having fun in their music making this year so far. I mean, everything from the Beatles to Styx to Harry Potter to just finding fun in the music, finding their own way of playing music that makes it fun for them. Some of my students are trying to play things in retrograde. I mean, just the list goes on. When you make it a real challenge to find the fun, to find fun things, it really does make a difference in the lesson. So I'm excited about that. So shout out to all of my students that are having fun in their music making. So grateful for my students. I'm also grateful for the coffee break that my students gave me for the holidays, and plus other gifts with music making themes. There were scarves, there were bags, I mean, you name it. And so I'm just really grateful for that. I met another teacher that has a Starbucks themed classroom, believe it or not. And guess what she got for the holidays? Tons of Starbucks coffee breaks as gifts from her students. And so you all know how I feel about coffee culture and music. I really believe that goes together, as well as music making and wellness and some of the other things that we throw around. So we will be delving into those as well. I do have an announcement though. I am looking for co-promoters for the music of CMajor. Shout out to the promoters that are working with me to have me come out in New York and present my music. And I know the work that I have to do. I have to get serious about building an audience. And it can feel like I have an audience, but at the same time, to actually work to build an audience, it's going to take some work. I know this. So shout out to you guys for working with me on this. And the idea of co-promoters for the music of CMajor is strictly voluntary. So if you think you would like to be a volunteer, please let me know. It's all about the growth of the music. And if you enjoy the music of C Major, send me a note. You can contact me on Twitter at CMajorPorter1. And thank you so much. There's a lot going on. I want to tell you all about it, but again, let's just give a big shout out and a cheer for everyone that's given us a great start to 2020 with your music making, and good luck to you all. So I just want to pause here for a moment. Let me bring the music down a little bit. You all know that some very challenging things happened over a week, over about the last few days, I would say, over the last week. And so everybody's talking about it. And I really have very few words to say. I really don't know what to say. I know what my thoughts are. And only if you're my closest friends, I've expressed my thoughts. But take a look, if you can, to our CMajor Before The Show page on Facebook. And you will see a video posted of Mr. Bryant playing Moonlight Sonata. It just felt like it was something I could do and maybe should do, just to kind of shine a light on a very talented individual. And just take a look for yourself if you can. If I have a chance to go on Facebook today before we leave you, I will. And just beyond that, make the best music you can make. We're still encouraging you to do that for 2020. Coming up for this week in C Major's classroom, we're going to be talking about listening for structure in improvisation. That's going to be a challenge this week, and you're probably thinking to yourself, improvisation has structure? Yes, it does. There seems to be a few ways that you can improvise. One of my students recently told me that he didn't get improvisation. He thought improvisation was quote-unquote weird. So we're trying to give him some ways to think about ways that he can improvise, and if he finds that sort of music making fun, or can find some fun in it. But everyone is different. I want to pause here for a moment just to have a chance to take a look at our resource here for history. It's February, can you believe it? February 1st. And so I mentioned the tune Lift Every Voice. And I might have read this before on the podcast. But let me just say here, there's a section in the book that talks about the new century. And who was making music in the new century, and who was writing musicals and so forth. And so there's some mention of, and I make sure I get this right, Rosamond Johnson wrote some musicals, and she had collaborators. And then here's the part that's interesting. It says, best known of the songs for which Johnson wrote are The Maiden with the Dreamy Eyes, Didn't He Ramble, under pseudonym Will Handy, Little Gal Since You Went Away, and Lift Every Voice and Sing, which was written by the Johnsons in 1900. Can you believe that? 1900. and performed by school children in Jacksonville, Florida, where the Johnsons were teaching. The song became so popular in black communities that people began dubbing it the Negro National Anthem. It was almost always sung at large formal gatherings such as NAACP banquets and gatherings to honor race heroes. During the 1950s or 60s, African Americans began singing the song in gospel style, renaming it the Black National Anthem. Rosamond Johnson was active in diverse areas of music during his long career. He toured in vaudeville acts with Cole until the latter's death in 1911. So the Cole they're talking about is songwriter Robert Bob Cole. His dates were 1868 to 1911. And they're just talking about all the writing of the music that they did. And so let me just go down to the part where they talk about Porgy and Bess, because I had a chance to hear some of Porgy and Bess today on New York's public radio. Very fascinating. So let's see here. He toured in vaudeville acts with Cole until the latter's death in 1911, then with Charles Hart and Tom Brown successively. During the years 1912 through 13, he served a long residency in a London theater review, for which he wrote music, and after returning to the United States, was appointed the director of the music school settlement for colored in New York. And that was around 1914. After the war, he toured with his own ensembles, the Harlem Rounders and the Inimitable Five. The Inimitable Five, and as well as with Taylor Gordon in concerts of Negro spirituals. In 1936, he was musical director of the London production of Blackbirds in 1936. He also took roles in dramas during the 1930s and sang in Porgy and Bess in 1935. So let me just hop to the history of Porgy and Bess, because I heard that, again, like I said, on New York's public radio station. And if we look at the Harlem Renaissance and beyond, there's a section here that talks about that. It just says 2 works of the 1930s, Virgil Thompson's Four Saints in 3 acts, and George Gershwin's Porgy and Bess, were more than merely operas for black performers. They were milestones in the history of black music. So I'm just going to turn the music down a little bit, and let's see if we can learn a little bit more about Porgy and Bess. Have you listened to Porgy and Bess? Do you know this music? You might do that just to listen and see what you can get from it. George Gershwin's opera, advertised as an American folk opera, received its premiere in Boston in September 1935 and opened in New York on October 10th, 1935. Okay, there's some other details about it. So they're just saying that Ira Gershwin, George's brother, contributed most of the lyrics, and they're talking about who wrote the libretto. It's right here. It's so fascinating when you start to see how this was put together. And Gershwin had spent the summer of 1934 in Charleston, South Carolina, working on his opera about black folk life on that city's imaginary Catfish Row and absorbing the musical sounds. He paid particular attention to the Gullahs on James Island, whose folkways seemed close to the African tradition, and the Holy Roller prayer meeting that he attended left an indelible impression upon him. The summer's experiences enabled him to give the music of his opera an authenticity that helped make it an American masterpiece. Now, here's where it gets more interesting. The music of Porgy and Bess reflects the jazz milieu of New York in the 1930s, but at the same time portrays the musical habits of black folk in the South. All the folk song types Gershwin could have known about appear in the score: spirituals, work songs, street cries, praying songs, mournful blues types, and jubilees. This in addition to conventional arias and recitatives. Gershwin did not actually quote folk melodies, but rather invented melodies in the spirit of folk music. So interesting. And then you can read the story of Porgy, you can read about Crown, you can read about Bess, and it goes on and on and on. So I just wanted to share a little bit with you about what I have been listening to recently, because I think that's the thing that musicians want to know once they get together. They were like they're usually talking about who you're listening to, who you've been listening to lately. And there's a mention of someone named Tom Brown, but it came across my desk this past week, that another Tom Brown associated with a very well-known singer. I believe she was from the Bronx area, but definitely the New York area. And she passed away this week. But if you have a chance to listen to the tune called Jamaica Funk, I think it's called Funking for Jamaica, Funkin, and then there's an apostrophe because you don't say the G, for Jamaica, but it's about Jamaica Queens. I think when it came out, as the story was told, people thought it was talking about Jamaica in the Caribbean, but it was really talking about Jamaica Queens. And then Tom Brown, the person that was responsible for putting it out, later on became a pilot. I believe the story is told. He wanted to have real work that he could do and not just rely on music, but the vocals, the way that the vocals were sung were just amazing. And just the music, if you see the video, it's just it looks like they were having fun. I think when I think about music making, I think about that. I think about music that I grew up with in the community. I think about my friends when they make music together, whether they can read music or not. It just seems like almost every musician I know, when they're making music, they're having fun doing it. So it's always very surprising to me when I have requests to teach somebody to play piano, but yet they're stressed out about doing it, because I don't find music stressful. The only time I find music stressful, I have to admit, is when I know I haven't practiced. And then I'm put on the spot. And so sometimes music can be stressful when you don't know what to expect, or when you know you're not well prepared. But that's what practice is for. In the jazz world, I believe they call that woodshedding. So a lot of things going on in my mind today. Again, it was just a loaded week, just very busy, a lot of things happening in the news. But my thing is this: if you can just pull away and just find a way to make music, somehow it makes you feel better. It makes me feel better. Even when I was going through what I was going through with my situations that were adding disappointment and stress to my life, I found that music was a way to manage that. Making music was a way to manage that. Making up songs, making up sounds on the piano. And so I just wanted to put that out there. Groundhog Day is tomorrow. I want to say a little bit about that when I return. You are listening to CMajor Before The Show. we're talking about Groundhog Day. How many of you are looking forward to Groundhog Day tomorrow? I'm looking forward to Groundhog Day because I really want to see if this groundhog is going to see his shadow. And you know what? They were talking about presenting a robotic groundhog. Did you hear about that? I was like, how could you possibly make Punxsutawney Phil into a robot? I don't know. Let me look that up. So now I'm going to go with you online because I'm curious to know a little bit more about Groundhog Day. And the plans for this year. Now that we're in a new decade, will we have a new groundhog? Is my question. So while I'm pulling that up, let me just mention too that the photo that you see for today's podcast episode, for our 200th episode, is a picture of nails. This is a person that I know that likes to play the piano with nail tips. You have to laugh about that, right? You have to find humor in that. Like who does that? Who practices Hanon with nail tips? Well, let me tell you, I'm inspired. I want to try that. So I was instructed to go over to our nearest pharmacy and pick out some nail tips for myself and then see if it's possible for me to play 62 exercises with nail tips. Okay, now, Groundhog Day. So it says, Groundhog Day is a popular tradition celebrated in Canada and the United States on February 2nd. And it derives from the Pennsylvania Dutch superstition that if a groundhog emerges from its burrow on this, and then it cuts off. So you can read the rest just by Googling it. And then, of course, you know, the film Groundhog Day. We're not talking about that. I'm talking about Punxsutawney Phil. Is he going to see his shadow or not? So let me just look this up. Punxsutawney Phil being replaced. Punxsutawney Phil. And if you know how to spell Punxsutawney, it's spelled Punxsutawney. Punxsutawney. I think you say the N. Phil. Replacement. Yeah, okay, here we go. Here we go. Look at this. But it's time for Punxsutawney to stop terrorizing an innocent rodent, says the animal rights group PETA. Instead, says the organization, Punxsutawney Phil should be replaced with an animatronic groundhog that uses Al to actually predict the weather. Isn't that something? So Punxsutawney Phil should be replaced with Al Groundhog. Replaced by a robot. Can you believe that? Wow. So it's true. I just heard this in passing. I said, what? They're going to replace Punxsutawney Phil with a robot groundhog? So they want him to retire. Interesting. Okay, you can read this story for yourself, but happy Groundhog Day tomorrow if you're celebrating. And also some birthdays happened this past week. Mozart had a birthday, I believe, and Schubert had a birthday. And so shout out to Mozart and Schubert. So speaking of robots, you know, we're talking about Punxsutawney Phil being replaced by a robot. There's a song called Mr. Roboto. I don't know if you've heard it, by Styx. And so I have a student that's finding fun in the music of his parents' generation. So I think next week I may even present a little bit of that music on the podcast just for fun. It's a song that I grew up with. And so it was nice to see that it was coming back into my life, that song. And we are also going to talk about fun music exercises with improvisation. Again, I'm asking the question, if it's not fun, why do it? So look for, instead of homework, we're going to Gradually replace that word homework. Some of my students find that's an ugly word for them. They do not like it. They do not like practicing, and they do not like doing their homework. So think of it as a fun music exercise. If you think of music making as fun, and you think of exercising as fun, especially if you're into sports, music is not a sport yet. It could be one day. I would love to see that. In some regard, that music would turn into a sport. But for healthy competition, not one where everybody's going to be stressed out and disappointed at the end of the day. But look for a fun music exercise at CMajor's Classroom. We're going to be updating our theme for 2020 and for our weekly assignments on social media. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. Let me go to my Facebook page just really quickly now that I have you on. I know that I have some folks that were looking to tune in, so thank you so much for tuning in. And it looks like I have some memories that I can share on Facebook. Let me just share those really quickly. And thank you to my friends that are listening to the podcast. Really, let me give a shout out to my Facebook. I have some people reacting to my CMajor Before The Show's link. And then I have some people liking my posts. Okay. Let me just write something really quickly. And then I have to get a little bit better at liking your posts too. But I like to say thank you whenever you like my posts. So just know that. Okay, so oh, man. She's okay. I know what this is. Okay, you know who you are. Thank you for reacting to CMajor Before the Show. Okay, so let me go back now because, again, there's some things that we post during the week. And so we like to get your attention with, posting various things. And Facebook is really, really great about getting us, basically poking us to post something when we're a little bit quiet. But I'm going to be updating this as much as possible across the week. So CMajor plays, running music, and run. Welcome to the 200th episode of CMajor Before the Show. And then we are podcasting live. You're here on CMajor Before the Show. Feel free to join us a little bit later over at the CMajor Radio Show. And so you see that I gave a shout out to Mozart for happy birthday this week. I did not say happy birthday to Schubert, but I just heard that he had a birthday as well. And then, of course, you see the post about Moonlight Sonata. So check that out, see what you think. Also, I posted something about the tambourine. So I may be presenting a tambourine on the podcast. You've heard me present the cowbell, but I'm going to be presenting a tambourine as well coming up. And then you can see where we pause the podcast for just a moment because we had to really gather ourselves to come back to you. Okay, let me step out of this really quickly and let's go to Twitter. And then another place you can find us is over on Music Glue. And of course, you can find us here on the Spreaker platform. So again, just thank you so much for tuning in. It really helps us to know where we can help you in your music making. And definitely see us over at the CMajor Radio Show in a little bit. We're going to do a fun analysis of today's chords that we used in our running music and for Run. And so definitely see us over there. Okay. Now I'm here on Twitter. And then what you can see is our pinned post, our pinned tweet. And then you can see that we're live here as well. And then other postings throughout the week. So if you have a chance, look at us. Find us on Twitter at CMajor Porter 1. And then lastly, but not least, we're going to Music Glue. And as usual, you can also find us over on CMajorPorter.com for CMajor's Classroom. Okay, I'm just looking at Music Glue because one thing I want to do is start to offer things here that you can pick up that are associated with the podcast. Not sure what those things are going to be, but I have some things in my mind. And more fun and funny moments in 2020. That's what we're looking to do. Stay tuned for more music fun and funny moments in music making. Thank you for continuing to listen to the podcast. We'll have tickets, we'll have recordings, we'll have merchandise to offer this year. At least that's my aim. At least that's the plan. And thank you to the CMajor Street teams and co-promoters. See you all again soon, and thank you again. So again, if you want to be a co-promoter of CMajor, please let me know, and I'll tell you what that involves. You've been listening to CMajor Before the Show. Have a wonderful Saturday evening. See us a little bit later over at the CMajor Radio Show. We'll continue this conversation about the chords used in running music and run. So I'll see you a little bit later over there. Have a fantastic week, and I can't wait to see you again. Make the best music you can make, and have a terrific day tomorrow. Take care.